Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo.
Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Welcome to the JM Report. I'm your host, IAmGoodOlJM. This is episode 76, coming to you from CSP Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And we got a jam-packed show tonight, or today, depending what time you hear this. Just a lot going on. There's a lot of expectations coming in the next week, into next month, as a matter of fact, as for the first time, I'll say maybe early 2000s. I'm going to say, yeah, the actual the year 2000. Many of you may remember we had literally different options, literally wrestling almost every day of the week on television between WWF, WCW, ECW. There might have been literally one day a break. It might have been Wednesday. I can't remember, either Wednesday or Thursday, that there wasn't wrestling on at TV at all, which would have been a nice cutaway point where we can relax, taking the first 2 days, take a break, and then take the next 2 to 3 days of wrestling. It is just crazy because we have a lot of years coming. A lot of it, well, all of it was expected, of course, and hopefully for the better, and we have, call it what you want, whether you're a diehard, whichever organization fan, and I have to agree with the logic, the frame of mind where competition does bring out the best in everyone. And at the end of the day, the people will choose who will be the better brand, the better company, organization, which three initials will carry on to the next week to keep the momentum, or the one who came in second place the first week will find a way to get ahead of the curve, so to speak. So we just got a lot to talk about here. I debated whether or not to cover Raw and Smackdown and NXT this week because in comparison to the other stories I want to cover, not that they are irrelevant, the shows of what happened on Smackdown and Raw and NXT, but next week is really the bigger deal. So with that said, yeah, I'm not going to cover Raw, SmackDown, and NXT results this week. I don't think either show was that bad or that good either. Somewhere in between. I felt like that they were just savoring the moment for now, waiting for the eventuality to come in the storm of competition. And not to mention, this coming Wednesday will be the official debut, the official debut of NXT for 2 hours. As for the past couple of weeks, including this week, the first hour of NXT will be on the USA Network. And if you wanted to continue the show, you had to log on to the WWE Network to watch the second hour. So they were testing the waters a little bit. And I thought it was a good way to bring in more traffic to the network after the first hour on USA. Well, you want to watch the rest of the show, you got to log in or subscribe, right? But come next Wednesday, can't do that. I mean, well, you can, but saying to watch on one cable channel and then try to log into your streamer, that's taken up. Basically, the middleman's cut out. And I just got to worry about channel surfing like we used to do in the old days. So a new generation is going to have a bit of opportunity to know how it was like during the Monday Night Wars, channel surfing between WWE and WCW. Now there is the Wednesday Night Wars, although it hasn't been officially dubbed that. But let's be honest, when it comes to head-to-head, identical product, if you will, people are going to choose. I mean, when there was a matter of fact, it still goes on this time around during football season, for example. You got multiple games, and if you don't have the NFL package or the NFL network, either you have picture-in-picture or have to press on the last channel button on your remote. Or nowadays, I've seen people get creative nowadays where they avoid the NFL network, they avoid channel surfing by purchasing multiple television screens and set them up on their walls. And I'd be curious to know what they do for a day job. But to have multiple TV sets and multiple cable boxes or satellite dishes, whatever they have, and to stream or view multiple games from around the country at the same time, if they're happening at that time. Kudos, but I'm sure that light bill is kicking your ass every month, or at least during football season. But it's a little easier, I guess, maybe, to our advantage nowadays, how everything's advanced and technology, and people can still channel surf, which is fine. I mean, I still do that. I have the picture-in-picture option, but yeah, it's, I don't know, it's just not what it used to be. I guess when it first came out, it was so impressive. But what I have to my advantage is DVR. So even though I'll probably catch myself flipping back and forth between AEW and NXT, for example, but I can watch. Matter of fact, I can record both shows, and for whatever reason I miss them, I can always go back. But if I'm watching live as it happens, yeah, I'll be flipping back and forth, and just like the old days, they're gonna try to figure out what the other show is doing, so they can counter it. And there's going to be a lot of running around and mixing around of the order of segments, probably last-minute changes to scripts. It's basically a strategy, like you would have in a war, and it'll be chaotic to say the least. Personally, I'm going to assume AEW and all those involved in the higher-ups are aware or have the slightest idea what they're getting themselves into. Again, things have been made a little bit easier technology-wise, but it still takes a lot of manpower to run a kind of show like pro wrestling on television. And with that said, a new era of pro wrestling begins this Monday night with WWE with their fall premiere. And the main event will be for the Universal title, Seth Rollins defending against Rey Mysterio, who won a Fatal 5-Way elimination match earlier this week on Raw. Then over on Wednesday, the official/unofficial kickoff to the Wednesday Night War begins as AEW Dynamite will debut on TNT, going head-to-head officially for 2 hours live against NXT on the USA Network. On Friday, 1 week from today, Smackdown debuts on Fox for 2 hours, and they really loaded up that show, which I'll cover here in a bit. Also, in a couple of weeks, after the Bound for Glory pay-per-view, Impact Wrestling will debut on Access TV on Tuesday nights, because apparently that spot is wide open now. So what can we expect from next week from all these shows besides the matches that have been announced already and the guest list? Well, according to WrestleVotes over on Twitter, we're expecting new stages for both Raw and SmackDown. As many of you know, SmackDown had already debuted their new Fox logo a few weeks ago, and this past week on Monday, the new Raw logo has been debuted. It's pretty much the same as the previous one, just it just looks like they picked up the logo and slightly bent it right in the middle, right straight down the middle of the A, and boom, there's your logo. So just take a 2D image, turn it into 3D, pretty much. But at least it's different. It's unclear whether or not we will see stages, the physical stages, if they will be different from what we have now that look very similar, except the actual doorway, and they use the same setting basically for pay-per-views. So that's not clear yet. If moving forward after the fall premiere and the Fox debut for Raw and SmackDown, it's unclear if the stages will be different or we get literally new settings every week. Not every week, but at least for every pay-per-view, and different looks for the stages for Raw and SmackDown. Something else that WrestleVotes mentioned, because now it's in their budget, they can afford it now, and maybe bring that extra oomph, especially to Fox. Pyro. We could see the return of pyros on stage and maybe in the ring. I don't see how they can pull that off with the LED post specifically. Not that Kane's going to be returning every week and set those fire posts off every time, but maybe a little danger close. Hopefully I'm sure they have, but hopefully they've tested out and make sure that there isn't any damage, not only to its ring post and skirts, the LED ring skirts and whatnot, but that's just a lot of electricity going into a wrestling ring. On, through, over, under. That'll be just a lot of stuff. Not to mention the performance inside the ropes. But as you know, WWE released Pyro from its contract back in June of 2017. Feels much longer than that. But Pyro will make cameos here and there, especially on pay-per-views recently. And the idea is with SmackDown moving to Fox with a whole new roster. We still got the draft coming up too as well. That it's a 2-night draft, and we will see who goes where. And definitely have a different setting or landscape, if you will, going into 2020. But it's not all peaches and oranges, especially those who are anticipating the debut on SmackDown on Fox. Bad news for those fans waiting for SmackDown who have the Dish Network. Many of you may not get to see it. According to a report from the Sports Business Journal, Dish Network has dropped all of their Fox channels, including Fox, Fox Sports, Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2, and the Big Ten Network from their lineup as of this past Thursday afternoon, which is just yesterday. So this puts Dish subscribers on missing out on NFL and Major League Baseball games, including WWE. Of course, NFL season just kicked off about a month ago. Major League Baseball is in its playoff season. And now there might be no WWE debut of SmackDown. Dish Network also owns Sling. And this might also affect their customers. And Fox has released a statement in regards to the matter. Basically saying Sling and Dish is at it again. And yeah, this is not the first time they do something like this. Not to Fox specifically, but to other specific networks. Anyway, the statement goes on saying that Sling and Dish has decided to drop leading programming as a negotiation tactic regardless of the impact to its own customers. Dish and Sling elected to drop Fox networks to coerce us to agree to outrageous demands. While we regret this, Dish and Sling's preferred to approach its negotiations. We remind our loyal viewers that the Fox services are widely available through every other major television provider. Well, that's Fox's statement. Dish, in a matter of speaking, fired back, saying Fox's actions are profoundly anti-customer. Fox is raising prices and turning its back on its public obligations to provide channels to customers for free. It's clear that Fox cares more about padding its bottom line than serving its viewers. To add insult to injury, Fox pulled its channels right as viewers head into the heart of the football and college football season. We asked Fox to stop punishing its own viewers so we can focus on reaching a fair deal. You know, Fox isn't the only one that's doing something like that, where they add. It's interesting that FX or FXX wasn't even part of this, but point being, one network has a variety of channels now under their same umbrella, and others that not necessarily share the same name, but they're owned by one brand. Like, for example, Disney, for those who don't know, they own ABC and also ESPN. Not many people can put together how does ABC and ESPN be owned by Disney, but it is, among other things. And or even freeform television, a far cry from ESPN and ABC, right? But it's the same owner. But anyway, they just have there is so much content out there, and what used to be provided in the 80s and the 90s can't even compare to what is brought out nowadays, because it's almost like fast-paced delivery on content to be put out there, and whatever couldn't be put out there will be available on the streaming network or on demand. It's just crazy, and there's so much television to it's difficult to keep up with. Hell, for a while, eventually I go back to it, but for a while I was doing a minor movie critic role that I wanted to incorporate also whatever debuts on television, and it's just so much. Not to mention I can't really go to the theaters every week, even to catch a decent independent movie. But it is just crazy. So they're playing the blame game here, and it sucks, unfortunately. I remember something like this happening to me in New York, where it was still Time Warner, and I think it was Universal, who owns ABC, NBC, and Univision, for example. They were threatening to drop. I think they might have for maybe a day or so until final negotiations were reached and a deal was made, and they were back on the air. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's the customers that suffer. I mean, the cable bill itself, it's outrageous. That's why many people are switching to streaming and watching their stuff online. I mean, what do you pay for besides maybe a Wi-Fi connection? But it sucks regardless at the end of the day for those customers that still use Dish, for example, to catch WWE programming, and they're going to miss out this coming next Friday for the Smackdown debut. And speaking of which, the guest list has grown in the past couple of weeks to help bring in the celebration, if you will, of the Smackdown debut on Fox, as Stone Cold Steve Austin has being promoted, or advertised, I should say, to appear on the Friday Night Smackdown next week on Fox. He will join the list of Kurt Angle, Lita, Mick Foley, Booker T, Hulk Hogan, Trish Stratus, Goldberg, Jerry Lawler, Mark Henry, Ric Flair, and Sting. Curious to see exactly how they will incorporate all of these legends throughout, or maybe just one be just one big segment at the end. Everybody's toasting champagne, but here comes Austin with the beer, similar to his return to MSG a couple of weeks ago to close out Raw. And with that, as expected, comes the announcements of new announced teams for Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. So basically, take the current Raw team, the current Raw announced team, and all three are moving over to SmackDown. So you're asking who's taking over Raw's announced team? Well, Vic Joseph, the returning Jerry the King Lawler, and Dio Madden. I got to be honest, I haven't heard too much of Madden's commentary. And I'm familiar with Vic Joseph a little bit. He might have done a couple of episodes of Smackdown recently. Not recently, maybe I'll say about a year ago. And of course, we all know the previous Raw announced team over to SmackDown. Yeah, if the idea here is, but then again, the argument will be Jerry Lawler. But if the idea is to go with a younger announced team, if you will, then there's only so much more that Jerry Lawler can do and provide. Same thing with Cole. And Lawler was great during his time. He's done a few cameos here and there. Really doesn't provide much anymore. And what they got him saying in the ear on the headsets or following a script, it's just... But it is what it is, and at least it's a change for once. Of course, I have options to listen to other different languages, but it is what it is. Or I could just not watch at all, right? Speaking of commentary, and by the way, the NXT announced team stays exactly the same with Nigel McGuinness, Beth Phoenix, and Mauro Ranallo. But Mickie James has been doing commentary herself. Matter of fact, making her commentary debut this past week for Main Event. Of course, none of us will get to hear it until another month from now when it's uploaded to the network. But according to BW Insider, when it comes to Mickie James, it's been discussed that she could be a potential producer working backstage for the company. And James, who has suffered a torn ACL back in June during a house show, had a successful surgery to repair it and is making her return. We can assume that she's been given the green light to return into in-ring competition, but perhaps it's one of those, we have nothing for you right now as far as in-ring action goes. But I guess the go-to solution and to avoid losing any talent to any company around the world, we'll make you a producer. Why not? Be a producer. Mickie James has been back with the WWE for nearly 2 years now. And though she made quite an impact, quite a shocking one, assisting Alexa Bliss, feuding with Becky Lynch at the time, and mixing it up with the current talent on the women's roster. I thought it was a good look. She brought a different feel to the matches. I don't think there was ever a match that I can remember now that she's had either bad chemistry or a bad match with anyone. I mean, she's a veteran at this point. She's a new mom. And I guess maybe laying back a little bit. And plus, she's still focusing on her singing career. That's been very successful. She's been touring a lot before returning to WWE. And she's still doing it. She's still doing her thing. So kudos to Mickie James. And if it does happen, she becomes a producer backstage for either Raw or SmackDown or both. Who knows? That she could provide more input into the women's roster and women's storylines, especially if she's ever asked to have a brain picked by anyone in creative. This past Tuesday on the Steve Austin Show, Stone Cold reflected on his final match in his career versus The Rock back at WrestleMania 19. If you can believe it, was in 2003. Since then, Austin has made several appearances, especially recently with the Raw reunion show, Raw in Madison Square Garden, toasting basically the top talent on the Raw roster: Seth Rollins, Braun Strowman, Cedric Alexander, and the Viking Raiders. But he says he's physically, if he wanted to, he can have one more match. Everybody's asking, come on, Austin, one more match. And in a sense, I can understand why, because we were all blindsided by his out-of-nowhere retirement after WrestleMania 19. It just happened. He never came on television. for example, like Daniel Bryan or Shawn Michaels or anyone who retired officially, to make their long, heartwarming speeches and fade to black. So maybe a lot of people, not including myself, but maybe a lot of people feel that they would deny that. Of course, social media didn't exist as it does today. And I don't remember Austin putting out a statement. He might have some kind of statement, whether it was Facebook or MySpace at the time, but it's an arguable conversation. Austin says he can do it. Another thing is not his doctors, but WWE doctors clearing him. And he understands as well that it's a risk, it's a liability. He would have to sign a hell of a waiver to bypass those doctors in WWE to give him that one more match. Now, unlike Shawn Michaels, for lack of a better term, broke his own promise in staying retired, but gave in to wrestle in a tag team match in Parts Unknown versus Kane and The Undertaker. This is where Triple H tore his pectoral muscle going over the top rope. As Austin shared on the Steve Austin show, saying for the last couple of weeks, down there at Raw for the reunion show in Tampa, down there at Madison Square Garden show for Monday Night Raw, people always ask me, hey man, you're still in really good shape. You got to have one more match left in you. In turn, Austin says, and I tell them, man, I say, it's a tough thing to think about. Physically, would I be able to have one more match? Yes, most definitely. And I can make it to that match with Audrey. Although the risks are always there, just because I think all the surgeries I had, where I had the spinal stenosis, getting the bone spurs taken out of my spinal cord, I'm in a good place. Nerves are feeling a lot better than they used to. So, in theory, could I have a match? In theory, yes. So Stone Cold, and notice he never mentioned anything about money. Him just saying that he's in a good place tells me, to me, it says he's secured, like in that fashion. Financially, he's secured, so he won't need a huge, I'm sure it'll be nice, but not that he needs a huge payday from WWE from having his one more match against whomever. And at this point, I love Stone Cold Steve Austin for everything he's done. He took that huge leap, and some might say even a risk, when he jumped to WWE from WCW, and all he wanted to do was be the best, become the best. And Austin is in WCW. He got as high as becoming the United States champion. Depending who you talk to and who you believe, there was supposed to be a program between himself and Hulk Hogan, possibly for title contentions somewhere down the line, but it never happened, whether Hogan nixed it or Bischoff or Dusty Rhodes, who was there at the time, booking. So who knows? Who knows what would have happened? I'm not calling anyone a liar, but there are unfortunately multiple stories to the same book. Fast forward, most recently this past summer, The Undertaker versus Goldberg. Now, I'm still convinced, had Goldberg not knocked himself for a loop between headbutting the door and headbutting the ring post when he went for a spear in the corner, not to mention getting dropped on his head by the tombstone that everybody seems to forget about, the match would have been a lot better than what we got. Now, I'm not saying because they're too old, they can't do it anymore. No, far from it. Hell, you see how the physical shape that these men are in? Granted, you slow down as life goes on physically, but if you're going to the gym and you're at Undertaker or Goldberg's age, past 50, and you're still able to squat 300-400 pounds, deadlift, or just squat them. You're in much better shape than the average man watching these TV shows. But for Austin, yeah, no doubt. And I agree with a lot of people who walk up to him and say, you look in great shape. You still look, of course, because he takes care of himself. What else would he be doing? Yeah, he drinks beer, but even that he toned down on a little bit to have his life to be in a good place like he says it is. I don't blame him. He mentioned the risks. He mentioned that in theory he could do it again. Maybe someone in WWE has whispered in Vince's ear, like, hey, Austin said he has one more in him. What do you think? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But the bigger question would be, I'm sure the fans of yesteryear will be interested. Well, what about the fans of today who don't know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is? Might have seen or heard of him in video games and surfing through the network, YouTube videos and whatnot, what he used to do, and you wonder why half the things Austin used to do they can't get away with now, especially when Austin did that heel turn in 2001. Yeah, there's a lot of shit that Austin did. Nowhere, no how can get away with today. One example, and you can look it up on YouTube. I haven't seen the network version of it. It may or may not have been edited or toned down, but now that I brought it up, I'll probably go home and see for myself. But when it was the 6-person tag team match, it was Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Stephanie versus the Hardy Boys and Lita. Lita gets the win over Stephanie. And, of course, Austin and Triple H are pissed. Hardy Boys are beaten down on the outside. And Lita is surrounded by Triple H and Austin. She's first facing Austin, then turns to Triple H, back to Triple H face to face. So she's stuck. She doesn't know where to go, doesn't know what to do. She finally turns to face Austin, and from behind comes Triple H with an elbow to the back of the head, stomps on her a few times. And yeah, at that point it's chaotic enough, but it gets worse or better for some of you psychos out there. Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy try to intervene and save Lita, but here comes Austin from behind with a steel chair, knocking both Hardys down. And Triple H delivers a pedigree to Lita. And as Hardy's trying to save and protect her girlfriend at the time, Lita's covering Matt Hardy somehow was able to come out of the pedigree effect. And Lita's covering Matt's body. So what does Austin do? Like, okay. And starts nailing Lita with the steel chair as if he's hammering down railroad spikes. I don't know how many chair shots. Had it been almost a dozen chair shots to Lita's back. And he was relentless. And if you listen to JR's commentary, he almost damn near cried what happened to Austin. And for her trouble, she gets the stunner at the end and Raw goes off the air. So that's my abbreviated version of what happened. And if you're listening to this now and getting a little cringeworthy about it, just imagine watching it. And looking back now, I saw the clip on YouTube maybe a few months ago. I was like, shit. Damn, they were crazy back then. And we watched. So what's to say about us? But nowhere, no how, doesn't matter what you would do to pull it off on a network without getting the FCC on your ass about it, among other groups that are against, especially women abuse on television. And, intentional abuse, not that you watch it on a soap opera or a movie and, every week there's a group outside of whatever network saying, hey, don't show that again, kind of thing. These groups are smart enough to tell the difference between reality and entertainment. Although, seeing a woman being down for the purposes of entertainment, well, you know what? Let's put a pin on it for now and get back to it some other time. So Austin returning to the ring. I don't know how I segue to that. Who's interested? I mean, better yet, who his opponent will be. Would it be Kevin Owens? I mean, that's a good mixture there. Maybe Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns. See, it doesn't have to be a heel. And right now, they're sorely lacking in the heel department, as that's one heel that you just hate by the side of him or her. I guess the closest would be Brock Lesnar, but you really want to put Austin against Brock. You talk about risks. You want to put Austin against Brock Lesnar. A match I feel that we were denied as well had Austin not walked out, but at least there were some altercations between the two in the past few years. Not recently, but in the mid to late 2000s. And so we got something out of it. But time will tell. And if it does happen, I'm more curious to see who his opponent will be. Not so much whether the match will happen or not. And probably the biggest story of the week, John Hennigan, better known as John Morrison, Johnny Impact, Johnny Nitro. Is he making his return to the WWE? Now, as of this past Thursday, less than 24 hours ago, multiple reports, multiple sources reveal that Morrison, or Johnny Underground, whatever you want to call him, has made a deal and signed with the WWE. Now, this is according to PW Insider, who was the first to break the news, I believe. Now, as of officially right now, and I even double-checked this morning before I came to the studios, there's no word yet on when he'll make his return to the company, but apparently a deal has been signed. Now, I don't know if it's because of the wording or the language that some other sources are using, that it almost feels as if, well, it's not official yet. Well, judging on PW Insider's track record, I'm leaning towards that personally. Yeah. It wouldn't shock me. This is not a case where Morrison or Nitro, what do you want to call him, goes to NXT first and then to the main roster. No, I think he'll more than likely go to the main roster. If it's official, more than likely, probably won't make a presence known either during or after the upcoming draft to have a better idea where he's going and where and what to expect of him. And he hasn't been there since 2011. So a good 8 years since Hennigan has been in the WWE. Of course, he's been everywhere else, such as Impact Wrestling and Lucha Underground, and of course, traveling around the world. And again, it's one of those interesting things. I've seen a lot of comments online. Isn't anyone from Impact that jumps from there to WWE learn their lesson of what they've done with their Impact superstars? And they gave EC3 as an example. I mean, EC3 was doing great on NXT, and once he got to the main roster, it's like, we'll figure something out for you. If there's a mindset where a wrestler's being treated that way, like, well, where I came from, I was a top guy, I was a main eventer, I was the world champion, and blah, blah, blah. For whatever reasons, you leave that company, go with WWE. People know who you are. People recognize you. They appreciate and respect you. The whole 9 yards. And you go through something like what EC3 has been. Successful in NXT, but the main roster, not so much. They tried, but one of the usual arguments is, well, the crowds are different. The audience is different. They don't know who you are. Which is bullshit. But if the mind frame is like, well, I'm signed with WWE. They don't use me on TV much, which I believe is a added bonus, or you get that TV time check, if you will, when you make appearances on Raw, just like EC3 did this past week against Rusev. But they're not using me much. I'm here at the arena, see if they got something for me. No? Nothing on Raw? Okay. How about Smack? No, nothing on Smackdown? All right. I'm still getting paid at the end of the week, folks, or every 2 weeks, as I believe it's set up. And if it's one of those 6-figure contracts, and you complain that, oh, I'm getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I'm not on TV. Boo-hoo. Of course, then again, there's the opposite logic of that. You want to earn that paycheck by showing off your skills and talent in the ring against whomever, babyface or heel, whatever the angle is for you. So you either one or the other. Well, at least you're not sitting at home, right? Getting paid, like as a recent Luke Harper, getting paid out the remaining contract for doing absolutely nothing. But somebody either pull their head out of their asses or develop a conscience. Hey, we got Harper, right? Yeah, let's use him in this storyline with Rowan and Eric Rowan and Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns. Makes sense. He's already contracted, so why not use someone like that? You know, it'd be funny, and I thought of this when I was putting my notes together last night. Just to be, and they've done this before, not this particular what I'm going to share, but WWE has pulled tactics and real dick moves, if you will. John Morrison, Johnny Nitro, whomever. He's been out of action as of late due to injuries. But he's making a comeback, obviously. But just to stick it to AEW, or to spite them. Just imagine, and I'm probably the first one to say it out loud or in public. Just imagine they introduce John Hennigan as, and now Johnny Dynamite, or John Dynamite, just to get back at AEW for reasons to get back at him. How and why? It's WWE. Do they need a reason? So, I mean, when they were coming up with names for him back in the day, and Bischoff was running Raw, the storyline, at least, was for Hennigan to get on Bischoff's good side, and decided to change his name to Johnny Nitro to, I guess, keep the spirit of the old WCW alive kind of thing, but who knows. But Johnny Dynamite or John Dynamite, something along those lines, would not surprise me. And matter of fact, it shouldn't surprise anyone. It's so obvious, but we'll see what happens in the next few weeks, whenever he returns or makes his re-debut on WWE TV. This is interesting, as many former and or retired MMA fighters have been trying out their hands in pro wrestling. Most recently, Cain Velasquez out in AAA. Well, how about a former Major League Baseball Jose Canseco trying his hands in pro wrestling? World Class Revolution Pro Wrestling has announced that the former Major League Baseball star is set to make his professional wrestling debut at Oklahomania 4 on November 3rd. What can you say about that? Man, there aren't too many baseball stars that crossed over like that. Football stars, yeah, and back and forth. But Major League Baseball players, we've had basketball players. Not all of them were at the NBA level. Kevin Nash, unfortunately, never got to go that far, but he did see college basketball success. So did Giant Gonzalez, and did Greg Khali play basketball? But point being that crossovers can be pulled off successfully if done right, if trained properly, from any sport to another. And of all people, I mean, nothing against the guy, but I just never visualized or ever thought of someone like Jose Canseco want to try his hands at pro wrestling. Is it a long-term gig? Don't know. For his sake, hopefully he knows what he's doing. And November 3rd, well, it's a local event, unless if it's being streamed somewhere. Be curious to see how you would perform. And Oklahomania 4, well, I wasn't aware there were 3 previous ones, but I'm going to look those up and tidy up on my history a little bit. Nyla Rose has gotten into a bit of hot water recently and has issued an apology for a poor reaction to an insult from a comment on Twitter. Well, the apology goes as follows. I would like to apologize for my comment yesterday. This would have been Monday of this week. I have always tried to take the high road and rise above or ignore the hateful insults I receive daily. Unfortunately, I let some hateful comments get in the way of my better judgment. I believe that sometimes people forget that real people are on the other end of the screen. I replied in frustration and anger and didn't consider the people it could affect and hurt. For that, I am truly sorry. Now, Rose is referring to a GIF that was on Twitter. It's been since deleted. It's so harsh that I'm not going to repeat it here. All I can say is that it sounded very personal, and to that person who put it together or uploaded it or just posted it, you can go to hell. I understand, as Rose mentioned, goes through a daily routine of insults. I mean, it's just ridiculous to go through something like that on a regular basis. And just thinking about it now, it's just it's frustrating me. Nyla Rose made a choice in life. Not everybody is going to understand it. Let's be honest. You're not going to understand it. If you look at it from a point of view of either liking it or disliking it, that's the pretext of judging. I don't know Nyla Rose personally. Just whatever has been picked up here and there that Rose has been willing to share to the world as far as what path was taken, what path was chosen to get to where Nyla Rose is today. Hopefully, and I don't believe so, but hopefully this doesn't tarnish anything moving forward with AEW, because Nyla Rose is scheduled to take on Riho to crown the first ever AEW Women's Champion this Wednesday night on Dynamite. So, folks, I'm sure you've been told before, for those who do it anyway, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But we live in a world that have trolls and have nothing better to do than to make other people's lives miserable because they're in a worse scenario. But one thing's for sure about these haters, if you will, for lack of a better term, they are a bunch of cowards. To sit behind a keyboard and call out people on whatever life-changing decisions that they made to be where they are now, to be who they are now, successful and accepted by a much larger margin in society than you are. Yeah. You can kiss my ass. Moving on. Chris Cyborg once again is interested. Just do it already. Of possibly jumping over to pro wrestling. Cyborg is keeping options open, and that includes a potential crossover into pro wrestling once again. She did an interview recently with MMA Fighting and spoke about her ongoing interest in wrestling. So why is this brought up again from Chris Cyborg herself or her camp? Well, Cyborg recently, again, as I mentioned, did an interview with MMA Fighting, and this interest of her crossing over increased more after signing with Bellator, as she's no longer with UFC, and this allows her to compete in other combat sports, including boxing or wrestling. Hence, that's how Bobby Lashley was able to do it. Lesnar was able to do it as well, but, I would love to be a fly on the wall one day during these negotiations and see how exactly Lesnar was able to have a dual contract between UFC and WWE. Obviously to get an extra paycheck, but specifically to jump back and forth as he did. And the funny thing is, Brock never really competed in UFC, even though he was under contract with them while in WWE. Twice. Now he's retired. But anyway, getting back to Cyborg, Bellator has that more leniency for their athletes. You're not fighting every week, you're not fighting every month. So in between, if there's an opportunity out there, take it. But, just let us know to make sure that's in conflict with our schedules. And I think that's fair enough. Cyborg made it known that she's interested in a chance to work with either WWE or AEW. Interesting. I say that because before the last time Cyborg would have an interview like this and announce a possible crossover, AEW wasn't part of the conversation up until now. She says, I love both AEW and WWE, and the fans of professional wrestling are always stopping me in the street asking me, when am I going to have a wrestling match? If the opportunity presents itself and the deal makes sense, I would love to challenge myself with pro wrestling. My focus right now is on becoming the only champion in MMA to win all 4 major world titles in the same weight class. It's quite of an accomplishment, if you ask me. Well, back in the day, we didn't get Ken Shamrock versus Dan Severn 3 in WWE. When was this? 97, 98? And both men have wins over each other in UFC. And UFC was way different than it is today. I'll say that much. So if Cyborg chooses WWE, can we get the match or fight that we were not allowed or able to see because of her step down and retirement from the sport, and see Ronda Rousey versus Chris Cyborg in WWE instead? Maybe. Possibly. And Cyborg hit it right on the nose, if the deal's right. The former Victoria from WWE, or better known as Lisa Marie Varon, as of last weekend has announced she is officially retired from in-ring competition, as she had her last match against fellow WWE alumni Melina. Victoria will post on social media confirming that her match with Melina over at Masters of the Ring Entertainment from North Carolina last Saturday, I should say, was indeed her last one. Commenting, "Oh, it's true, it's damn true. Thank you for Masters of the Ring Entertainment for main eventing my final match this past Saturday. Such an honor leaving the ring as the women's Master of the Ring Entertainment champion. Thank you, Melina, Terry Reynolds, Trish Stratus for sharing the moment with me. Don't be sad for me. Be happy for me. I've had an awesome 20-year run. I love you all so very much. I'm appreciative of your support and loyalty." And I gotta say, Victoria, Lisa Marie, amazing individual. I got the opportunity to meet her on several occasions. Such a sweetheart, such a nice person, down to earth. I mean, despite how you see her on television, whether she played a woman that could either be unhinged or a little bit, not all the screws are tying in kind of thing. But again, such a far cry from those characters. And yeah, definitely had a great run. Great meeting her. And I would assume the next step will be Hall of Fame. Obvious choice would be WWE, but there are other Hall of Fames out there dedicated to professional wrestling. and well deserved. Literally has broken bones for the business. Made comebacks and have great rivalries back in the early 2000s. Teaming up with Stevie Richards for a while. Feuded with Trish, as you mentioned. Mickie James in her first run. Gail Kim before parting ways with WWE for good. Tori Wilson. Stacy Keibler, although it wasn't a long-term feud. But great memorable moments. Did she ever have a match with AJ Lee? I can't remember. Probably not. But was at one point declared one of the strongest women in professional wrestling. Used to be a bodybuilder. And she's shown great feats of strength in her matches. She also feuded with Ivory. Good run. Well-deserved retirement. And I hope now she's kicking back somewhere on the beach on a cocktail or two, just enjoying the rest of her life. Though little mention was made this week on WWE TV, but not much of a follow-up with the storyline of Mike and Maria Kanellis over the baby mama drama. But Maury Porridge Porridge? Did I say porridge? Maury Povich chimed in over on Twitter, offering that, hey, we can have a paternity test to find out who the father is. Right now, it's all eyes on Rusev. But again, no follow-up even during his match with EC3. No Maria ringside. No Mike Kanellis confronting him or anything like that. But Povich has offered a paternity test. Fraternity, what's wrong with me? To find out who the father is. No mention or no reports or any kind that these superstars would appear on an upcoming episode of the Maury Porridge. Yeah, I did it again. What's wrong? I can't enunciate today. But there's no word on any upcoming episode for the Maury Povich show that would include either Rusev, Michael, Maria Kanellis, or Ricochet, or anyone else that might be involved with the storyline. It might be entertaining as hell. Different twist on what Povich usually provides on his TV show. But for the sake of entertainment, yeah, I'll probably watch that episode. Why not? Or go a different route and just have Povich appear as a guest on either Raw or SmackDown, depending where these talents end up after the draft. And throughout the show, just tease. We'll find out in this envelope. I have the results of who the father will be. And just line them all up. Rusev, you are not the father. Ricochet, you are not the father. And the funny thing is, because usually when that announcement is made that so-and-so is not the father, the mother will be crying waterfalls because she thought a specific guy was the father. But I think Maria will have a completely different reaction, just laugh it off each time, and then get to whomever they're going to announce as the real father. That's not Mike. For the sake of argument, let's say, I don't know, Pat Patterson, you are the father. I'm like, wait, what? When did this happen? How did it happen? Why did it happen? So just to stir the pot, yes, I'm aware of Pat Patterson. But, just imagine, you don't have to describe or explain any specific details, but the fact that, just an announcement like that out of nowhere, out of left field, and you keep it going, and well, no, I want to retest because he can't be the father. Now, whether how far they want to take that explanation is up to them. But, that I do find entertaining and hilarious because we all know, realistically, it cannot be true. And for those who are wondering, Google it. Google Pat Patterson. It's not my place to discuss anyone's life choices and lifestyles, if you will. Unless you're a hater and just shitting all over it, then yeah, I'm going to call you out on it. Anyway, a few injuries to report, probably more serious than any in-ring injury, but involving two former WWE superstars, legends at this point, one of them being a Hall of Famer. But first, Brian Knobbs had an unfortunate turn of events take place in his life and encountered an infection in his knee that would require a full replacement surgery. Knobbs' friend Fred Jeng, if I'm pronouncing that name right, set up a GoFundMe page, and their goal was $10,000. And Knobbs at first had a slow start when it came to the FundMe page, but thankfully it kicked up a notch or two, and mostly thanks to Chris Jericho for donating a tremendous portion of the remaining balance, and Knobbs was able to reach his goal and have successful knee replacement surgery. So again, Jericho stepping up to the plate. You know, he's a man's man, the reason why he's considered the greatest of all time. And this is one of the reasons. You know, Jericho sees a fellow comrade, if you will, in need. I don't know. Personally, I don't know Chris Jericho's frame of mind as saying, like, well, I have all this money, I don't know what to do with it. Oh, wait, someone needs surgery that I used to work with. How much does it need? Oh, yeah, here's the remaining balance. Go have your surgery. Can't be any more generous than that. I mean, I'm sure you can if you give someone a house or something like that, but, you know, when it comes to life-altering changes, and, yeah, very grateful, Brian Knobbs, I'm sure is, of Chris Jericho stepping up to the plate once again and being so kind and generous. When I go home, it's the weekend. So when I go home, I'm gonna have a little glass of the bubbly myself and give a nice toast out to Chris Jericho for being such a kind man. In other news of injured or ill wrestlers, that being of Hacksaw Jim Duggan, as I left the studio, news broke that Duggan was hospitalized last Friday. At first, all we knew that was just a medical issue. No one knew exactly what was going on. But thankfully, everything's okay now, because Deborah Duggan, wife of Hacksaw, took to Instagram to share a photo of Jim in recovery. Duggan went in for a planned heart procedure last March after being sent to an intensive care unit in South Carolina last November for irregular heartbeats, or AFib. But in the post from his wife, Mrs. Duggan revealed that Jim had 2 emergency surgeries in the last 24 hours after having a severe infection. But they think everything is good now, and Duggan will remain hospitalized for a few more days and hopefully be on the road to recovery. And that is just insane. 2 emergency surgeries in 24 hours. Glad to hear he's pulling through, Jim Duggan, and that it makes a full recovery. Hopefully it does. For those who follow him on social media, he's, besides being on the road and attending wrestling shows here and there, when he's not competing, he's traveling, visiting different places in the country, and most of the time would have Mrs. Duggan with him. So another example of there is life after pro wrestling if you take care of yourself right. And yes, unfortunately, nature takes over sometimes and rears its ugly head and will give someone an issue. In this case, heart complications or irregular heartbeat, and 2 surgeries in 1 day or less than a day. It's just really crazy sometimes. But Duggan, get well soon, because you've always been a tough guy. Also, superstar Billy Graham. He himself has been having heart issues. He put out a statement on Facebook. Hey fans, I am back home from Mayo Clinic Hospital. I wanted to thank everyone for their well wishes and prayers. I need rest now But by this coming Sunday evening, I will give all my Facebook fans an in-depth report on the status of my heart, which is 48 hours from now. All I will say for now is that I have suffered a heart attack and I am in constant heart failure. I am, of course, on medications for my heart and will be for the remainder of my life. I am keeping the faith and will fight. It's unfortunate, superstar Billy Graham, to be going through something like this, and he was one of the, at the time, a key witness during the steroid trial against Vince McMahon. And I don't remember if Billy Graham used the word abuse, that he abused steroids. He might have. My memory of that ordeal is a little iffy right now, but he admitted to taking them, to have the physique he had during the 70s and into the early 80s. He bulked up such more during the late 80s, and that's when complications to his body began. Though in great shape and seemingly was trying to make a comeback in 87, but was ultimately and long time written off WWF TV. I believe it was Superstars of Wrestling episode. He had a match against Butch Reed and was double teamed by the one-man gang. And that was after it was announced that he'll be part of Hulk Hogan's Survivor Series team that year for the inaugural event. And he was saved by, of all people at the time, recently turned babyface Don Morocco, the original Rock. And he became the replacement for Billy Graham. Of course, Billy Graham never made a full-time comeback to wrestling, in the ring at least. He'll provide commentary. He was part of the announce team for SummerSlam 88, the first ever SummerSlam out of MSG with Gorilla Monsoon. And I thought he did a pretty good job there. He would do more episodes of commentary with McMahon and Bruno Sammartino. There's a hell of a combination for you. But for all we know, and I don't know if diagnosis or any tests were run for this, but because of his current heart condition, and we've heard this before in recent years, where it's a long-term effect, although not 100% proven, but it's more of a suggestion that long-term effects of steroid usage or steroid abuse can lead to heart failure. It's different for everyone as far as what these long-term effects are and when and where they'll kick in. Do these individuals keep in mind, like, well, I stopped using anabolic steroids at this year. Whatever's in my system that stayed behind can or may not affect me later on. Who knows? But point being, are there any examinations for that? To see, like, well, there are traces of steroids still left in these organs, and these are solutions or possible ways to treat it or whatnot. You know, obviously, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not pretending to be one here, but from what's been reported and what history has shown, and if anyone's ever seen the Bigger, Bigger, Better, and Faster documentary, it used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it's there anymore, but you can catch it on YouTube somewhere if it's not taken down already. But they state that there aren't any long-term effect studies, mainly because it affects everyone differently. And although outcomes are very similar, but even those similarities can be very different, especially when and where in the body it strikes you. But commonly, it has been the heart. And you can mention any names that have passed away in recent years from heart issues, heart failure, heart attacks. And then whether you ask yourself or you remind yourself later on, oh yeah, didn't that person who passed away abused steroids or used steroids at some point during his or her career. It's possible, but as far as I'm not jinxing Mr. Graham here, but as far as the final cause of death or the cause of death, they'll never say, or I never remember hearing, well, so-and-so abused steroids, that's why he died. Anyone can abuse over-the-counter medication and really screw up an organ in your body. And before you know it, it's too late to make a comeback from it because your said organ is so heavily damaged from overdoing it on over-the-counter medication. In turn, unfortunately, they lose their lives because of that too. I'm not trying to lecture anyone here, but it's what happens. It's what can happen. Only problem is, like I said, you just don't know when and where it's going to happen and how. So here are get well wishes to Brian Knobbs, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and superstar Billy Graham to get well soon. Finally, David Benoit. If that name rings a bell, yes, he is the son of late Chris Benoit. Recently had an interview with Pro and Bro podcast that's hosted by the former Darren Young in WWE. And David said he's interested in joining AEW as he attended both Double or Nothing and All Out, saying, I love AEW. That's a good time, good quality product, some good wrestling. I went to their first show, Double or Nothing. I want to go to AEW 100%. I love AEW. I love what they do for the boys and take care of them. So David Benoit has hinted that he's been training recently, mostly, as he put it, just messing around in the ring with a lot of talent from AEW, getting a feel for it. And he does have a close relationship with Chris Jericho, who is the current AEW World Heavyweight Champion. Now, people are going to ask anyway, or at least have that frame of mind. If David Benoit were to have any interest or an opportunity, let's say, to sign with WWE, more than likely he'll probably be in the NXT brand to work on his skills and ability in the ring and eventually one day move up to the main roster. But knowing how WWE is, and again, their history has shown it, everyone is going to know who David Benoit is. And you can't hide the fact that he has a striking resemblance to his father. So if WWE were to accept him, you sign him up and whatnot, even changing his name, which they'll probably do, or of course not refer to him or who he is in relation to a previous talent that allegedly pulled off these acts of a double murder suicide. You'll definitely hit the brakes. Like, wait, what? Because there'll be those who weren't around to know what happened back in 05. Was it 05, 06? But when this tragedy happened to the Benoit family. And since then, he's been blackballed. Chris Benoit has. No mention of his name. Erased from all websites, at least from WWE. His matches still can be seen on the network. If you happen to own his autobiography DVD, Hard Knocks, the Chris Benoit story, I consider that a collector's item or an antique up by now. When it first came out, it was shortly after WrestleMania 20. And I went and bought that copy because I thought Benoit was a wrestling god. Would have the greatest matches on damn near every pay-per-view, every Nitro, then eventually Raw. But now the son wants to follow in his father's footsteps. To make it this far to make these kinds of statements and comments as he did over on Pro and Bro podcast, I'm going to assume that he's already discussed this with his family and gotten their blessing. Otherwise, why make such comments that are positive to him that he wants to move forward with his life and probably do something that he always wanted to do as a child, even way before the tragedy happened, and just had a knack for it. You know, not all sons and daughters follow their parents' footsteps into the wrestling business, although they still can, but not maybe in the ring, but work behind the scenes at some capacity. Personally, and obviously, David Benoit has nothing to do with what happened, what happened to his mother, to his brother, what his father did, allegedly. And besides being horribly affected by this, in every possible sense of the term, emotionally, psychologically, it's not something I'll bring up personally. I mean, I can't see myself asking what he went through after finding out what happened to his family. I'm sure he wouldn't mind discussing it, but that's up to him. But as far as stepping between the ropes, in this case, AEW, no word yet as if there's been any talks or negotiations between both parties. But because personally how I feel that he had nothing to do with what happened to his family directly, but of course being related still affected him, it's his choice. And no one should be really against that because of the unfortunate past should not affect the future of what he wants to do in his life. I say give an opportunity and see what happens. David Benoit, by his last name alone in the world of pro wrestling, knows who he is. Changing his name, not that AEW will do that, but changing his name won't change the fact of who he is, but he would eventually have to have his own identity in the business. Like everything else in life, he has to earn it. It's easier for someone like him in his position because, again, his family was in the business long before he was in the world. So let's see what happens. Wouldn't surprise me if a deal has been made or was about to be made in the next few days. And David Benoit's first appearance for AEW will be on the first episode of Dynamite. So we'll see. And with that said, I know I'm cutting it short here by not covering Raw and SmackDown and NXT. It's an end of an era, so to speak. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's a whole new era coming starting next Monday, moving forward, at least into the next change of things, and there'll be another new era. But I'm looking forward to it, see how I'm going to handle so much wrestling in 1 week to cover here and to simplify everything. It won't be easy. I know other podcasters are doing the same thing or going to go through the same thing, but we'll see. And yes, Hell in a Cell is next Sunday, and I will have a breakdown on that and the results, obviously, on the following episode of the Jam Report. But for now, everyone, it's autumn. We are officially in fall season. Start getting to do some spring or summertime cleaning up in the garage and get those comforters and heavy coats out. As we're still in hurricane season. There's a winter storm already developing up in the north. So with that said, everyone, be safe, be good. It's good old JM. Till next time.
open minds, leave it all behind. So open your mind.